Right.
Oh.
I called the 34th meeting of Rotria 23-24 to order. And of course, welcome to our speaker. And guests I just cannot see at the moment. If there is any guest logging in, please welcome to you all. And thanks for joining us. May
Lost you for a moment.
Good evening.
There's 1 minute silence going on.
thank you.
Sorry.
Yes, no, it's okay. Sometimes you cannot make out if you log in little late. Okay. Our club secretary Suman is traveling, and that's why our joint secretary Rohit is standing in for Suman for today's secretary's announcement. Rohit, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, President Gaggi. Yeah, welcome all. Good evening to all of you. Playing the role of the joint secretary for the first time this year. No escaping this time. Yeah, secretary's announcements, starting with birthdays. So on the 26th of February, Shankar, spouse of Rotarian Suman Shankar, celebrates his birthday. On the 27th of February, Anna Pai celebrates her birthday. No wedding anniversaries to report now. Committee meetings on the 23rd of February, where the TRF and Public Image Committee meeting that is hosted by Ann Shireen and Rotarian Santosh Narendra at their residence. On the 24th of February, the Vocational Services Committee meeting is hosted by Cherin Vebi and Beena Cherin at the Indian Gymkhana Club. So all committee members are requested to attend, and spouses are also invited for fellowship and dinner. That's the brief announcement, Secretary's announcements. Thank you, and looking forward to hearing from Mr. Anand.
Yeah, thank you, Rohit.
Thank you.
I thought I'll just take half a minute to make another announcement, though there is another meeting in between, so I thought maybe it may not be required at this point of time. That is on 3rd of March, the End Polio, the Rotary's mega project is going to be held. So Shabir is circulating the request to all the Rotarians to attend the project. And that is all. And again, we will be reminding everybody on the meeting day at 29th, sorry. Right. Now, may I request past President Shushila to introduce our speaker of this evening, Mr. Anand.
Thank you so much, Gargi. Anand is a dear friend from, we were colleagues at Coopers and Lybrand, and so we go back a long time. So he's a very accomplished person, so I'm not going to even attempt to talk about all that he's done and all of his experience, but I did want to highlight a few things. I think, you know, we were part of Coopers and Lybrand, and some of the things we learned over there were how to be extremely client-centric, how to be very, very flexible in terms of what we did, how to make sure that we delivered value. And I must say that Anand exemplified every one of those values. And thanks to all of that basic foundation, I would say, And also, of course, he himself, and you will, as you listen to him, see how interesting a person he is. But with all that, he was one of our most successful consultants, having done a variety of work in the finance area, a lot in the mergers and acquisition space. He then went on to Infosys and kind of changed tracks a bit and started looking more at marketing. He was heading marketing for some of the verticals there, was part of the global team, was in the US for a while, and then came back to India. And somewhere down the road, he decided, I think in the year 2011, he decided that he's going to just go on his own and bring together many of the skills that he has acquired over the years and is absolutely brilliant with. So things like marketing, communications, the ability to work in teams, the ability to help people really understand who they are and what their strengths are, the ability to work in a group in a very innovative manner. And as you listen to him, you will know what I mean by thinking out of the box. So with all of those skills together, he decided that he would do something completely different with his life. So he started coaching. So he does executive coaching, and also very interestingly moved into content. So he prepares. He really enjoys writing. He also enjoys music, but with his whole passion for writing and creating content and just doing very different and original things from day to day. He is now a content creator, and we are very thankful to you, Anand, for having agreed to do this session for us. It, as you can see from the remarks that you already had from our audience, it is a very important, the whole area of communication is very important for us, even more important for an NGO, because sometimes it is so difficult for us to really articulate all that we do. And in particular, be able to articulate value to our funders as well as to the beneficiaries that we work with. So we really look forward to this session. Thank you ever so much.
Over
Thank you so much,
to
Sushil.
Mr. Anand, please. Please go ahead.
Thank you all so much. A very good evening to all you lovely people. Can you
Yes, we can see it.
see the...
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, Sushila, thank you so much for those very kind words. I haven't known you to lie ever before, but maybe some elements of untruth have crept in today in terms of the encomiums that you have showered on me. But thank you nonetheless. Thank you so much. Today's topic that I've chosen is better communication, superior outcomes. And the reason for doing that is simply that, communication skills and communication as a process is so fundamental, so foundational to our lives on an everyday basis. We know so much about it, and yet many of us, maybe all of us, I dare say, encounter some challenges in the context of communication. So what I thought was I would try and share from my experiences some tips that would help each one of you, I hope, to become better communicators. Context, not just of your profession, but also in terms of the highly important work that you do as part of Rotary in order to help uplift lives, bring hope, bring joy. With that sort of introduction, let me dive in. Now, we've all defined communication in many ways. It's, the art, process, there is a sender, there is a receiver, all of those things. However, communication is much more than what we typically believe it to be. And the reason for that is that we often think of communication in a very narrow manner. We define it as a process that involves speaking, writing, presenting, body language, all of that stuff. We look on it as something that relies on text, numbers, sounds, pictures, images, and so on to convey messages. We look at it as something that is aimed at an audience, whether it is one-to-many, one-to-one, and so on. And obviously, we use physical or digital channels to transmit information. And the whole process is synchronous or asynchronous. So when I say synchronous, a conversation like this is synchronous. I'm saying something, you are listening to me in real time, you will have the opportunity to say something back to me in real time, and the process moves forward that way. As opposed to something that is asynchronous, where let's say I send you an email, I have no control over when you read it, when you choose to respond, and so on, right? So all this we know about communication. So what's the big deal? There are three important points that I believe we should focus on because we are not always mindful of these points. So what are those points? The first one is, do we spend enough time to understand the purpose of our communication? Do we understand why we are communicating? What is it that we expect from that communication? Many times we know it, we think we know it, and therefore we communicate in a certain way. But the reality is that very often our communication is not aligned to what our purpose is. So that's one thing that I want you to keep in mind. Always ensure that your communication is aligned to your purpose. The second fact that many of us lose sight of is that different people interpret information in different ways. They process information in different ways. They interpret information in different ways. And that is simply to say, not fit all. And therefore, the way we communicate with person A may not be as effective if we use the same style in communicating with person B. So we need to ensure that we understand who the audience is, we understand what we need to maximize the chances of our message being received and interpreted the way we intend it to be interpreted. In other words, the pictures, the words, the numbers, all of that is in a way incidental. What is crucial is the understanding of the message, is the understanding of the communication, the way we expect or we intend it to. The third piece that we often forget is that communication is a loop. It typically involves a feedback, and that feedback is either in terms of somebody saying something back to us, somebody asking a question at the end of the presentation, somebody replying to your email, somebody acting upon your instructions, or somebody being inspired by what you are saying, or somebody picking up the ideas that you are communicating and building on that. So depending on the context of the communication, there is some kind of feedback that is always associated. Because ultimately, we communicate with a purpose. The purpose for it to be achieved, the other person, the audience with whom we are communicating, needs to understand what we are saying or what we are communicating and needs to act upon it. So that is in some sense the feedback. And remember that in many cases, this feedback is tacit. It is not explicit. You communicate something to somebody, they understand and they act on it. And in a way, that itself is the feedback. But very often we lose sight of these three things. And as a result, what happens is that there are many challenges that we face in life that can be attributed to inappropriate or ineffective or inefficient communication. So what are some of these challenges? It could be misunderstandings. And these misunderstandings can lead to errors, minor, major, depending on the nature of the misunderstanding. It could lead to incorrect decisions. It could lead to gaps in the way we plan and execute. And for you in particular, this is important because many of you are associated with projects and drives of various kinds. So if you are not able to ensure that everybody who's in your team who's working together towards that shared goal is not on the same page, is not able to view things the same way as you intend them to, then there could be inadvertent gaps that arise in the planning and the execution. And if there are gaps in planning and execution, it is logical that the probability of not achieving the expected results or outcomes goes up. It's not just about the task you do or the achievement of the objectives. We all work with people. In fact, our human relationships are probably the biggest resource that we possess. And very often, poor communication can lead to breakdowns in our relationships. And sometimes they can lead to full. We see it in our political space every day. But the fact of the matter is that this is something that happens in our families, at home, at work, in the community, pretty much everywhere. And you don't even need to know the person very well for a conflict to arise. You're traveling by car, somebody else cuts across, road rage. So all of those are examples of conflict that could result from poor communication. In this case, your indicator could be the communication that we are talking about. What is common to all of this is that as human beings, most of us are hardwired assumptions about what somebody is saying or about a given situation, right? And that is the biggest danger, the biggest roadblock that comes in the way of effective communication. Logically, we all know that if something is not clear, we should ask for clarifications. We should ask questions. We should probe further. But in reality, many of us don't do that. And that is why I'm saying that assumptions are often the biggest cause of miscommunication. Am I audible? Am I going too fast? Is everything okay? Everybody's able to hear me and see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So let's take a simple example. This gentleman is told by his wife or friend or whoever, I'm going to be late, so do the cooking. Make some rice, and here's how you do it. And our good friend here has followed the instructions, he thinks, and this is what happens, right? A case of poor communication. Or is it a case of male incompetence? Either way, right? Or you have this patient who's telling the doctor, I've got a joint pain, a sore throat, and so on and so forth. Have you got anything? What he means is, have you got anything to cure me of these pains, right? And the doctor says, nope, I'm fine, thank you. So these may be sort of hyperbolic examples. These may be, sort of memes perhaps, but they underscore an important point, which is that communication is very easily held hostage to assumptions. I'll let you read this. I'd hate to be in the dad's position when the lawnmower has actually been sold, but nonetheless, this shows you again. And then, of course, you also have a situation where sometimes people tend to think that using jargon, using Tharuristic words perhaps is important, but it's not. The key to effective communication is to be as simple as possible. Somebody's expertise is best exhibited and visible when they are able to explain complex ideas in simple words. So you don't need to refer to a dictionary every time you receive an email from this person or you are sitting in a presentation or a meeting with this person, right? So having said that, I'm going to leave you with sort of 4 concepts that I believe will help you become better communicators. The first one is something that I call context. We'll come to the details in a bit. The second one is something that I refer to as distinction. The third and the fourth are presumably terms that you have heard before, WIIFM and WIIFI. And we will dive into each of these in some detail over the next few minutes. So what is context? Context is nothing but a frame of reference. Now, let's say I show this on the screen and say, what do you see? Anybody willing? Anybody is free to answer.
Blue.
Okay, blue. Anybody else?
Red.
Red, all right. Anybody else?
Blue written in red.
Excellent. Blue written in red. Now, what if I were to reframe that question and say, what word in the English language do you see? The answer will be common. Everybody will say blue. So what was the difference between the way I phrased the question the first time and the second time? I provided tighter boundaries. I provided a frame of reference. What word in the English language do you see? Or I could have asked, what color or what font is the word blue written in? The point I'm making is that in every communication that we are a part of, we need to make sure that we understand the context and the audience understands the context. Let me give you another example. Some of you are probably chartered accountants or finance people. Some of you may be in the technology side of business. So if I say IT Act, what comes to your mind first? Some of you might say Income Tax Act. Some of you may say Information Technology Act. But if I were to say that, given our sort of software upgradation needs or hardware upgradation needs or privacy policy or whatever else, we need to keep the IT Act and the provisions in mind, then automatically everybody who's in the audience, irrespective of what their background is or what their normal sort of frame of reference is, will understand that we are talking about the Information Technology Act. When you see the word kingfisher, how many of you first thought of a bird versus something else? Right? Or if you see the word python, how many of you thought of a snake versus a programming language? So the point I'm trying to make is that context is a very important part of our communication. It is something that we tend to ignore because most of us tend to view things from our own perspectives. Which brings me to the next point, which is distinction. And distinction is very, very simple. It simply means that different people view the same thing quite differently at times. Or for different people, different things are more important at a given. So if you are discussing a meeting, if you're in a meeting discussing a topic, then one person may be more focused on the end results. One person may be focused on the cost and the resources needed. Somebody else may be focused more on how we are going to raise money. Somebody else may be focused on the beneficiaries. So there are different things that you're all thinking about. Each of those is relevant. Each of those is valid. Each of those is important in the larger context of the projects that you guys are working on. But at that point in time, it's important for you as a communicator to make sure that you narrow down these differences so that everybody is focused on the same things. So what do you see in this picture? It's not a trick question.
You see a man's face, you see trees, you see.
All right, great. You see a man's face, you see trees. Anybody else who saw something else, perhaps?
A woman and a few lambs.
A woman and a few lambs, okay. Anybody else? Who saw just two huts and a boy sitting and some trees?
Yes.
Yeah,
Two huts,
There are a
yes.
few, there are a few sheep.
there are a few
Yes,
sheep.
all
Yes,
that.
absolutely. Sheep, lambs, whatever. There is a boy sitting. What do you see here?
You
Is the
see
woman is the woman looking at us or is the woman looking sideways?
both,
Right?
but I would say looking at us.
Fair enough. What about this gentleman here?
At us, I think.
I'm sure there are some people who are confident that it's a side view. Okay, what's this picture?
It's both a rabbit and a pelican.
A bird.
Ah, both a rabbit and a duck, right? So that's essentially what distinction is all about. It's a very simple concept, but it's extremely powerful because it has tremendous significance in the context of communication. When we communicate, we come from a point of, okay, so I'm seeing a duck, the other person also must be seeing a duck, but not necessarily. If the other person is seeing a rabbit, then the entire conversation that you're having can go haywire. Yeah? So we spoke about context, we spoke about distinction. The third topic that I want to talk about, the two of them together, WIIFM and WIIFY. I'm sure many of you have heard these terms. Anybody wants to share what they mean?
What's in it for me?
Brilliant. What's in it for me and what's in it for you? Now, why is this important? It's important because communication, as I said earlier, is meant to achieve a purpose. You have a certain objective in mind. You have something that you are looking to achieve through every single communication. Please, can you pass the salt? That's a communication. You have a certain objective in mind. Hi, I'm ready to order. Or something like, I have something to say. I don't agree with this. Right? So sorry? Somebody said something? So in each of these situations, the person who's communicating has a certain objective. And it's not just about spoken communication. When you write a request for a grant or when you write an email requesting for a meeting with a government official to discuss some policies or to discuss something else, each of these things has a purpose, right? So what's in it for me? And why that is important is you need to be very clear, what am I looking to achieve from this communication? Once that is very clear, and sometimes there may be more than one objective, then you need to make sure that you are using that objective or that purpose to guide your communication. How should I structure my messaging? What messages do I give? What is the order of priority? What language do I use? Should it be an email? Should it be a call? Should it be a WhatsApp message? Or should it be an in-person meeting? So there are multiple choices, multiple decisions that you as a communicator need to make to ensure that your message is received, decoded, interpreted, comprehended the way you want your audience to. And the process becomes a little more difficult when you have a large audience of more than one or two people, because each person in the audience has a different understanding of the context and a different distinction. And therefore, you need to make sure that you are able to address all of those and set the context and clear out what the distinctions are so that everybody is on the same page. Why do people say that? Reading of the same hymn book or on the same page. It is to make sure that there is a common denominator, a common frame of reference. Now, the most common example is, who is this person on your right? If I'm looking at a photograph or if I'm talking to somebody, my right or that person's right? So there are so many examples of how even day-to-day communication shows the importance of context, distinction, and all of that, right? Now, just as important as it is for you to understand what's in it for me, it is also important for you to understand what's in it for the other person. What's in it for the person that you are communicating with? Now, if you take the example of a donor, somebody may be a philanthropist, may be contributing regularly to Rotary and to other NGOs and so on. Why is this person contributing? What drives him? What is the motivation? To volunteer every weekend for 6 hours. What is that person's motivation, right? So you have to understand what that other person is looking for. And therefore, what information do they need in order for you to achieve your objective? Because remember, communication is about creating a shared understanding. In fact, the word communicare in Latin itself means common, right? So what information does the audience need for them to be persuaded to do what you are looking to achieve? Because you need their help, you need their cooperation, you need their participation. And therefore, that is the information that you should provide to them. And that will also ensure that you are able to address the context clearly for them, and you are able to ensure that distinctions are narrowed down. Because ultimately, communication is a way to bridge gaps and narrow differences. It doesn't matter what any theory says, what any model says, what who says. At its most basic level, every communication is aimed at narrowing the gaps that inherently exist between you and the people you are communicating with. So once you have this sense of what's in it for that person or what motivates that person, then you can start structuring your communication more effectively. The messaging hierarchy, what message comes first, what language, what channel of delivery, and so on and so forth, right? You also become more sensitive to, are there elements here in my communication that might be confusing to the audience? For example, if I say all of you look right, do I mean my right or do I mean your right? So very simply, I will say all of you look to your respective right. The word respective brings a whole lot of clarity, right? Is there a risk of violating people's beliefs? Which is why they say don't talk about politics, don't talk about, a whole bunch of those kinds of things. So people who are good at communication typically are able to understand WIFM and WIFI very, very intuitively. And if not intuitively, they put in the effort to make sure that they get the required information. And that will come when you have a high emotional intelligence, specifically high self-awareness and empathy. And these people, those who are good communicators, are able to differentiate between the position somebody takes and their interest. I'll give you a simple example. The farmers who are agitating right now in different parts of the world, let's say in Delhi, their position is we want to go to Delhi. But what is their interest? Or we want MSP to be guaranteed. But what is their interest? Their interest really is they want to ensure livelihoods, they want to ensure income, they want to ensure a certain standard of life, they want to ensure that their future is taken care of, all of that. So all of those are in the bucket of interests. But what they are articulating is we want MSP, we want MSP, we want the Swaminathan Commission findings to be implemented. So good communicators are those who are able to differentiate between these two and act accordingly. Now, Rotary International's mission itself is to provide service to others, promote integrity, and so on. Now, the words that I've highlighted in blue, each of those requires good communication. You need to partner with people to deliver service. You need to explain to people why you are doing something or how they should behave or what they should do. Right? Take your medicines properly. Get your children vaccinated. Right? Boil water or whatever else it is. World understanding. We have conflicts going on in different parts of the world. Why do conflicts arise? Conflicts arise because of, again, position versus interest, right? People don't necessarily sit down and talk enough about, okay, can we solve this? They don't want to because their egos come in the way. Other factors come in the way. So the simple point here I'm trying to make is that each one of you, as part of Rotary, you are working on multiple projects. Each of these projects requires you to work with different people, some of whom are maybe members of the club, some of whom are maybe outside external parties. But what is a fact is that each of these stakeholders have different views, priorities, and so on. They have different expectations and biases. And your communication needs to ensure that you narrow down all of these. And that is possible only when you consciously structure and deliver your communication to drive alignment and reduce divergence so that you can collectively achieve the outcomes. And stakeholders vary. So if the projects are done entirely by your Rotary Club, then obviously you will have certain people who are associated with the project, and there will be other people, office bearers and so on, whom you have to call upon for various things. If the project is done by or requires collaboration with external bodies, whether it is other clubs or NGOs and so on, then there are other stakeholders. Now, stakeholders are people who are interested in the project, who have a stake in the project, who are affected by the project. So think of it that way, right? Fundraising. Many of you are probably involved in raising funds and resources for the club. So how do you make sure that you are able to achieve your objectives? And again, we'll talk about that in just a minute, but communication plays a role. Communicating outcomes of projects. Once a project is done, once a program is completed, you have to report on the success of the program and so on. So how do you make sure you do that effectively? Membership drives from time to time. How do you ensure that people choose Rotary Club over one that is next door, or choose Rotary over somebody else, right? So each of these things requires different stakeholders, and I'm listing down these activities simply because each of these is, I believe, part of your work as members of the Rotary Club. So let's look at fundraising. So when you are raising funds, what do you typically do? You reach out to donors, your contacts, emails, crowdfunding, philanthropists, CSR, a whole bunch of things. But what do you actually do from a communication perspective? Yes, the objective is to ask for money, ask for help for a cause. But what will it take to influence the different categories of donors to contribute to the causes you have identified? Remember distinction. For them, polio eradication or whatever else, rehabilitating people who have been affected by floods or something like that may not be as important as providing midday meals or providing education to school children. So different people have different priorities, have different objectives, right? How do you make sure that you are able to bring them on board and help them contribute to your cause? Are you sharing the right information? One size we've already seen does not fit all. So if you are going to have the standard same email that you send to everybody, maybe it won't work in many cases, right? Which is not surprising because the response to cold emails is probably about less than 2 or 3% in the context of sales. In the context of NGOs, you may have curated databases and therefore perhaps the hit rate may be slightly higher, but it won't be hugely higher. how are you conveying the information? Is it through an email? Is it through a flyer which has some images? Is it through a call? Is it through a WhatsApp video? These are all options available to you. And finally, is the call to action that you are proposing easy? Is it secure? Is it convenient? So these are all the things that you need to keep in mind from a fundraising point of view. If we had more time, we could probably have gone into the details, but suffice it for now. I'm leaving you with some thoughts, and I want you to think of these questions when you are looking at fundraising the next time. Similarly, when you are communicating findings or outcomes, outcomes of your programs, what do? Ultimately, there are so many stakeholders who have signed up, who are involved in the whole process. So to whom do you communicate project outcomes? To the leadership team at the Rotary Club, to somebody else, to Rotary International, and so on. So what is it that they need to know? You are telling them a lot of stuff that you have done or that you think they would be interested in. But is that necessarily the case? Will they understand what you are conveying? What kind of data are you, in what form are you showing them the data? Very dense tables, heavy charts, lots of stuff on the slide, very crowded, may not work. Because remember, people come from different backgrounds. Some people may be more comfortable with numbers and some people more comfortable with words or images, right? What else can you convey that will be of interest to them? So these are some of the questions that you can think of in the context of communicating outcomes to various stakeholders. How much more time do I have? Sorry?
About 15
About
minutes.
30 years.
You have got about another 5 minutes to speak because we
Okay.
have a question
Fair
answer
enough.
session.
Done. So in the context of the communications that you as Rotary make, I would encourage you to use storytelling. Now, storytelling is communication, but in the form of a story, because arousing curiosity and adding elements of surprise helps to engage audiences. So combine circumstances, characters, conversations, conflicts. So if you were to create a short video, for example, a little child that has been vaccinated against something, those kinds of videos are more important or more impactful in conversations with donors, policymakers, and so on. And I'm using the example of videos simply because in today's day and world, they are very, very versatile. You can use them across different digital channels. And if it is, something that tugs at your heartstrings, then it obviously has the potential to become viral, and that increases the reach of the video, and therefore more people might be interested and willing to find out more about your club and the projects you are doing and so on. But make sure that the video is not very, very long. 1.5 minutes maximum, nothing more than that. And include the relevant contact information, because if somebody wishes to contact you to make a donation or so on after this, watching the video, they should be able to do it. Harness digital channels, your club's website, India app, all of these things. But the more important point is that these things will work provided the content is able to attract the audience. So it should be relevant. It should be focused on what might interest them. So we made a difference to somebody's life. We adopted a village, we did this, we did that, blah, blah, blah. Somebody doesn't necessarily need to know all that. We made a difference to 100 villagers. Simple, right? So the content needs to be able to attract the audience. It needs to be engaging. And it needs to be delivered through channels that facilitate two-way interactions, because that is what engaging content is all about. And if you look at your own website or other sort of resources you have, make sure the content is refreshed frequently and it is appropriately branded. So if individual members of the club write about their work in the Rotary Club on their LinkedIn pages, make sure that you do that if you're not doing it already. If you're doing it already, make sure that you are able to present it in a way that makes sense to the large number of people who might read it. we live in an age of virtual platforms and virtual communications, and I want to spend a little bit of time on the challenges that these platforms create for us. Attention spans are shrinking in any case. And you might be surprised to know that the average human attention span now is less than that of a goldfish. Research has shown that about less than 10 seconds. And when you are online, audiences get distracted more easily, right? When you as a presenter, or if you're in a presentation setting, you are not able to see every member of the audience at will, creates a certain asymmetry. If somebody turns off their camera or somebody is not even present there, you have no idea. That's not the case when you are physically present in a room. You can look at the audience, you can read the room more effectively. So when you are in a virtual mode, your ability to read the room goes down drastically. Read the room meaning look at people's body language. Are people confused by something that you have said? Are people shaking their head to show disagreement? Are they nodding their heads to show agreement? So these are all non-verbal cues that you as a slick communicator should pick up on and make adjustments. You can just pause and say, hey, I sense that some of you are a little unsure about something I said. Is there something that is bothering you? Do you want me to go back and cover something? That you can do more easily in a room with an audience where you are present as well. It's harder to do that in a virtual setting. And if you are working with people, or if you're communicating with people of different cultures and people whose native languages are different, then transcending those barriers is even more difficult in a virtual medium than it is in face-to-face, right? So these are the additional challenges that you face when you are communicating in virtual mode. And ultimately, of course, it is harder to gauge audience understanding and whether you've been able to answer their questions to their satisfaction. So with that, I sort of come to an end of this talk. I want to conclude by saying that I hope I have been able to convince you that communication is something that is crucial and something that underpins every stage of what each one of you does in the Rotary context and also in life in general. So whether it is creating awareness for the club or the programs, whether you are increasing reach, meaning more and more people become aware, whether you are raising resources, whether you are delivering out or refining campaigns, the whole thing can be a virtuous cycle if you pay attention to the communication aspect of each of these phases. With that, I end this talk. Thank you once again for this opportunity, and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Anand. I think your subject was such. Probably our Q&A session, once it starts, it will continue, because there are so many queries on this, and particularly in today's environment, all the domains, those are there in social media, has become so complicated that sometimes even clients get confused. Sometimes probably the proposal solver get confused. So that is why I'll now open it. Whoever would like to ask a question are welcome. Please put your question forward. Yes,
Okay.
Sudhakar, you would like to ask?
Sir Anand, I'm Sudhakar here. Although the name displayed is Jyoti, that's my wife. Okay.
Yes, sir.
When you talk about communication, you're talking about prepared communication by a person for a specific audience. But in life, there are different varieties of communication one is involved in, especially like when you have a group of people chatting. And there is no one specific topic. There are umpteen, from cricket to football to food to anything else you can imagine. How does all these principles find any place in a situation like that?
That's a good question, Suzanne. The point is that in an informal communication, when you're with a group of friends, most of you already know each other's distinctions. And the context here is basically to have fun or to catch up on something. So, in that sense, you know what your purpose is. It is not, when you're discussing cricket, for example, let's say you're discussing cricket. So, if you're discussing cricket with a group of friends, versus let's say you are discussing cricket with a group of young cricketers, there will obviously be a difference. One is a little more sort of casual, a little more opinionated, and there is room for that difference of opinion because the purpose is not as sort of watertight as it is in a more formal context. But the basic principles remain the same because if you don't listen to what the other person is saying, or you listen with the objective of replying or responding rather than understanding, then even among friends, the chances of arguments goes up. So the principles that I spoke about are just as valid for these friendly, informal conversations in life as they are to the more prepared ones. The application of the principles may vary. Did that make sense? Did that answer your question, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I can see Narayan raising his hand. Narayan,
Yeah,
please.
thanks, Gargi. So, Anand, thanks. This is a wonderful presentation, and definitely I can see, very useful amongst all of us in RCBC because, I've seen we encounter some of these classic situations that you mentioned, in every meeting and everywhere. So I think this is very useful. My question was slightly different, right? So one of the things, because English is such a funny language, especially email communications tend to, like what you intend to write, and obviously you can't put graph pictures and all in that, but what you tend to write, even officially and all, and what the other person or a group of people interpret could be very different. So, do you think that the same kind of recipe that you have demonstrated here is also useful in email forms, or is there any kind of recipe for email comms? Because I've seen simple, even two-liner English comms, people may construct in a very different way.
Absolutely, Narayan. The point is that the principles are the same, but when it comes to written communication, you have the help of the first additional principle I would point out is keep it simple. Avoid jargon. If you are using acronyms or jargon or whatever, make sure that in parentheses and brackets you explain what it is. Right. Second thing is think of the structure. So you may have, depending on what the purpose of the email is, you may have an email structure which says what this is about, who it is for, what you are expected to do. 3 headings. I'm just giving you an example. I'm making up something right now. But if you, in your mind, you think of it that way, and you also actually have those headings in your email, that may help people focus in that fashion. The problem that typically arises is that we think and we write at the same time. And our thought process is several times faster than our typing speed. And therefore, what happens is while we are typing something, our thoughts have already raced ahead. So we may forget something or we may not, structure it properly. So that is why I would suggest that having a structure with clear headings would probably help. Use tables, use graphics, and also what I sometimes tell people is think if you really need to use an email or if a quick call will help. Now, if you have people in different locations and different time zones and so on, then that obviously may not be practical. But sometimes uh, a call or a meeting is more effective than an email. And you also make sure that your emails, when you're, let's say, the heading, the subject line, all of those things, who you put in CC, all of these are metadata, all of these are additional props that you have at your disposal to make sure that your emails are more effective. I hope I've given you a sort of broad picture.
Yeah. Sure.
You're
Thank you so
welcome
much.
to contact me later, and we can have a conversation around that if you want.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Anand, I have got a question actually. You see, earlier we used to have print or television as a very broadly used medium, right?
Mhm.
Now, with the attention span shrinking by the day, we are thinking that yes, the social platforms are probably much more effective, and you cannot hold the eyeballs of your audience for very long. So that's the best medium. What do you think that the future of this communication mode, most effective one, probably?
I honestly don't know. Simply because different people prefer different modes of communication, different channels of communication. If you see people who are, let's say, 20 years and younger, probably are much more comfortable with Snapchat, with Instagram, or those kinds of platforms. Facebook, which was new when maybe 20 years ago or 25 years ago, and many of us got onto it, has now lost its charm for a large number of people, except those people who like to post photographs or this or that or the other on Facebook, right? So different channels have different characteristics and attributes, and therefore they serve different purposes. So as part of your communication design, one of the things that you should pay attention to is what channel is most effective for this communication given this particular audience. Now I'm talking in the context of one to many. If it is one to one, then of course the problem is a whole lot simpler.
Yeah.
But if it is one to many, that is why you see companies these days or businesses these days use emails, they use WhatsApp, they use Facebook, they use a whole bunch of different channels to reach their customers and engage with them, because this omni-channel approach essentially does mean that people will use different channels. And there are some people who will start with one channel and end up somewhere else. So unfortunately, there is no right answer for that, and you have to make sure that you do some trial and error, or you figure out, if you have an email, then summarize the email using pictures and use an electronic mailer, or use an image that you send on WhatsApp to people, the same content but structured differently. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you.
I don't know if that helped. I hope it did.
Yeah, because today's business environment doesn't even give us an opportunity for the trial and error method. So that is a major issue.
Which is why you have to learn from, when different people are working on different projects, you share your experiences. What for this set of people, or for this audience, this seemed to work well. And you say, okay, fine, if that worked well last time, let's see if that works well this time too. And you use that as your primary means and channel of communication the second time. And if it continues to work well, then you conclude that, this seems to be working. And then 6 months later, 1 year later, somebody will say, you know what, we got lousy results from this, so we should stop using this and look at something else. And maybe then the time has come to reinvent the whole communication channel all over again. So that would be my answer.
Thank you. Yeah, I can see both Shushila and Madhu. So Shushila, can you just put your question forward? Madhu, you can come in after that.
Anand, with AI and ChatGPT and all the rest of it, where do you see things going, and how do you think we can still get our message across with all of that? In a sense, I guess we can take advantage, but in another sense, all of that is muddling the actual, facts.
It is. And, I would say that at least for the next 5-6 years, I don't think AI and generative AI and so on will have the kind of ability that humans have in terms of crafting and finessing communication. So I would recommend that you use it like you use any other search engine tool, like Google or whatever else, right? And today, to be honest, that's what it is. Instead of giving you a series of links and URLs, it gives you a summary. But unfortunately, garbage in, garbage out still holds. So today, your Chat GPT or other such generative AI programs, they rely on what they have been fed. And what they have been fed are the millions of pages of unauthenticated data or stuff that people just write at random and so on. There is hardly any critical thinking, and that difference exists between humans and AI, and I believe it will exist at least for the next 5-7 years. It will catch up. So my recommendation is use ChatGPT as a tool to give you some ideas and get started, and then build on that. And if you're a team of people working on a particular campaign, ask different people for their views. Hey, what do you think we should start with? Do you think this or do you think that? Because when you have people with different backgrounds, different genders, different age groups, automatically diversity of thought comes in. And that diversity of thought is more important than diversity as is understood by the corporate world. I hope that.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Madhu, you had some query?
Yeah, Gargi, Sushila snatched my question.
Okay.
Yeah, but to just on the lighter note, probably the future of communication is that bots will be talking to each other, not human beings.
Yes. In which case, you and I as human beings don't need to be part of it. We just need to make sure that the bots are programmed to communicate better.
Right, Anand, thanks.
Is there any other question? No, I guess. Because I don't see any hand raised or anybody. Okay. Now, then I'd request past President Sudhakar to give the vote of thanks, please.
Thanks, Kagi. Thanks, Anand, for a lovely talk. So I go back to the beginning of your talk, where you spoke about the purpose, the interpretation, and the feedback. So I will give my bit based on these three. So the purpose of my talking is to give you a vote of thanks. The interpretation is that I will not leave any scope for anybody to think otherwise. And the feedback, I hopefully would assume, is a good feedback. So that is what it was today. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sudhakar. Thank you, everybody, for this opportunity, and happy communicating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was really a very, very good communication, but I think the subject is such, probably we need many more interactive session. So all of us can sort of exchange our viewpoints and discuss things.
Absolutely.
Thank you so
Absolutely.
much for talking to us.
Thank
And
you so much.
Thank
Thank
you, Sudhakar,
you.
for the vote of thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. So I adjourn the meeting.
Good night.